Scriptures, and it's going to be found in 1 Samuel chapter 14. If you've grown up in the pews or went to Bible school as a kid, you know 1 Samuel 17, because 1 Samuel 17 is all about David and Goliath. And it's important that we set the framework because this is going to show us an awful lot about David's perspective. And we're going to see why perspective then ultimately matters. We deal with hardships and difficulties and facing things that happen in our lives. And we're going to see a lot out of David that are not only representative of Christ, but are to give us the pictures of hope for ourselves. In 1 Samuel 17, it opens with a picture of the Philistines who are deep in the territory of Judah. We've seen that a few times in 1 Samuel, where the Philistines keep marching pretty deep into Israel's territory. Again, an indicator that Israel is not doing right by God, that these incursions and attacks and oppressions are going on. It is the days of the judges ultimately, and these problems are still going on. Even though we have Saul as king, he has failed. The Philistines then have made their way deep into Israel's territory, and because of that, it's time to establish some battlegrounds. I have a picture on the screen that gives you an idea of what this place looked like. We're told in the first couple of verses that we have the valley of Elah, which is there, the flat area of that screen. And you would imagine that on the right side of that screen then is where we see the Israelite camp. They have all of their armies lined up ready for battle. In between the two hills on the screen, which would be on the left side of your screen, would be where the Philistines are camped. And they've got all of their warriors and all of their soldiers. And the scene then is that you usually did these battles in a valley somewhere. So you have all your guys lined up on one side, all their guys lined up on the other side. But something unusual about this battle. Instead of just having both armies collide in this valley of Elah, as the first couple of verses describe them located, instead they're going to do something different. Rather than a bloody battle, the Philistines say, here's what we propose. We have a fighter champion on our side, and you bring out the fighter champion on your side. And we will then go about and let those two fight, and whoever wins, then that's going to just solve the battle. So, that makes a lot of sense in that regard. You'd certainly have to have a lot of confidence in your champion fighter to do something like that. Well, it is clear that the Philistines have a lot of reasons to hold on to the hope of Goliath as their fighter. We're told as he comes out of the camp that he is about 9 feet tall, wearing bronze helmet and bronze scale armor of 125 pounds. He has bronze armor on his shins. He's carrying a bronze javelin that was slung on his shoulders, and the spear shaft with the head on it weighs about 15 pounds, and he has then an armor bearer running in front of him. Everything in the description in these verses about the Philistine fighter is intended to be terrifying. He is a beast of a fighter. And that is why the Philistines will lay it out and just say, why don't we just have your best fighter come against our best fighter, and whoever wins will then be in charge, and the loser will then be servants to the victor. And so here is the champion for the Philistines, quite a warrior indeed. What is particularly interesting, verses 8 and 9 lay out the challenge. Here is this Philistine, this Goliath, and he stood and shouted to the Israelite battle formations, why do you come out and line up for battle formation? He asked them, am I not a Philistine, and you are not all servants of Saul? Choose one of your men and have him come down against me. If he wins in a fight against me and kills me, we will be your servants. But if I win against him and kill him, then you will be our servants and serve us. And then the Philistine said, I defy the ranks of Israel today. Send me a man so we can fight together. So just imagine that scene. And here you have this big guy with all of that armor walking out. laying out that charge. And what I think is particularly interesting about this is, you will notice verse 11, it says, when Saul and all Israel heard these words from the Philistine, they lost their courage and were terrified. Now, the reason why that should be underscored and highlighted here is, do you remember why Israel wanted a king? Israel wanted a king because they wanted to go out and have somebody fight their battles for them. Somebody who would lead them into victory and overcome whatever enemy came. Remember, Saul looks the part. He's head and shoulders above the rest of the Israelites. If we are looking through the Israelite army of who is the best person to go up against Goliath, it is certainly King Saul. He is somebody who's trained for this. He is somebody who is bigger than all of the soldiers. He would be the one that we would expect for him to go out for the people of Israel. But I want you to notice that verse 11 says it's not just the Israelite army, but Saul and all of Israel. When they heard these words, they lost their courage and they were terrified. In fact, you will notice that we are told in verse 16 that Goliath made this proclamation every morning and every evening for 40 days. So here we are in this valley for 40 days. And Goliath gets up in the morning and says, why don't you send out a fighter for me? And then every night he comes out again. Who's going to come fight me? Day 1, day 2, day 3. Who is going to fight Goliath? Who is going to be the one who will stand up against him? And the only response we see in the text is sheer terror. Everyone is afraid of him. In fact, we're told that when he comes out and takes his stand, that there is fear of all of the people of the army. They are just terrified of what this Goliath says. Nobody wants to go up against him. In fact, so much do they not want to go up against him. Verse 24 says, all the Israelite men saw Goliath. They retreated from him and were terrified. And it's to such a degree that in verse 25 we're told that rather than Saul going into battle and dealing with this opponent, dealing with this terrifying soldier in Goliath, we see that Saul then offers riches, his daughter in marriage, and free from taxation if you will go fight this guy. So Saul's saying, I'm not doing it, and if I can kind of coax anyone to do it, you're going to be rich, you get my daughter in marriage, and free taxes. I mean, who would want number 3 for sure? I mean, who's not going to sign up for this? And notice, nobody's signing up. That's what a terrifying figure this battle warrior is. Nobody's looking at this Philistine and going, sounds good to me, I'll take him and get the riches and the wife and the free from taxation. Every time he steps out, verse 24 says, they are absolutely terrified of him. 40 days, twice a day, walking out, armor, helmet, spear. Who's going to fight me? Who's going to do this? The big picture of the first scene is Goliath is the impossible opponent. Nobody can beat him. He cannot be defeated. No one can stand against him. The scene shifts in verse 12. Interestingly enough in all of this, David is back at home. The 3 oldest sons of Jesse, we were introduced to them last week as Samuel has anointed David to be king. But remember, David doesn't look like a king. He was left with the sheep and tending them, and thus the other boys were all brought out. Well, the 3 oldest boys are with Saul at the battle lines. And because those boys are there, Jesse the father is concerned and wants to know how the war is going, what is going on, make sure your brothers are okay. And so Jesse tells David, here's what I want you to do. I want you to gather up the provisions, get up early in the morning, run out to the valley of Elah, get out there to the battle lines, and check on them and see how they're doing, and then bring a report back to me. And so that's exactly what David does. David then gets the supplies together, wakes up early in the morning, and he makes his way out there. And interestingly enough, in verse 21, we're told that David arrives as we have the Philistine Goliath walking out, making his proclamation. Who's going to come before me? I defy these armies. If you're going to just come against me, bring on your warrior. I'm ready for you. He hears that man do that. And notice what we are told in verse 26. David spoke to the men who were standing with him and asked, what will be done for the man who kills that Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Just who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? We're already getting an interesting window into the perspective of David. Because you will notice that David does not have the response of Saul, nor the response of the rest of the armies. He is not terrified when he sees Goliath. He does not lose his mind to run away like the armies are doing. He does not wonder, well, what are we going to do about this guy? We're certainly doomed. You will notice his question is, essentially, who's going to go get this guy, and what is he going to get for beating him? That's his big question. What do I get for the one, just more generally speaking, what does the one get who goes out there and beats this guy? And so verse 27 says they tell him about the offer that was described back in verse 25 about what would happen. And you will notice that verse 28, we find out that David's oldest brother, Eliab, overhears David saying this and asking these questions. Notice his response to David in the middle of verse 28. He becomes angry with him and said, why did you come down here? Who did you lead those few sheep to in the wilderness? I know your arrogance and your evil heart. You came down here to see the battle. You will notice that the older brother understands what David is basically saying. Who's going to go get the wealth and the riches, guys? I mean, let's go get him. And they're saying, who do you think you are? Who did you leave your sheep with? Basically, is you are being insulting, and how dare you come out here and tell us that one of us need to go out there and win this thing? You need to go back to your father. You need to go back on your merry way and leave us alone. Because David's question implied victory, didn't it? David's question implied victory. What do you get when we beat this guy? He is not like, oh no, what are we going to do? He wants to know what is the outcome for the one who will defeat this uncircumcised Philistine, remove the disgrace from Israel, and because he defies the armies of the living God. Somebody's going to win against him, and what do you get if you do? And you can see his older brother just chastising him. What are you doing out here? Little David, go back to home. Go back with your animals and leave us alone. And I want us to see in this scene and in this moment that David is shown to be unique, that nobody has faith like him because he has a different perspective. You will notice that David is not looking at Goliath and saying, boy, he's really big, or he's really strong, or he's got a lot of armor on him. How are we going to get him? Or how are we going to reach him? He's so tall. The average height of an Israelite in those days was around 5'6". And so we're going up somebody who's quite a few feet bigger than you. He doesn't have that perspective. He just simply looks at it and says, somebody's going to win, so who's going to be the one to do it? With that in mind, now the preparation is made because he realizes that nobody is responding to the threat. Nobody is responding to Goliath's challenge. And so here is the great thing that you see in verse 32. David comes to Saul and says, do not let anyone be discouraged by him. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine. Don't worry, guys, I've got this. I'll go take care of him. Don't be discouraged. Don't be dismayed. There's not going to be a problem here. I will be the one to represent Israel. I will go into battle. I will be your champion. you all just stop worrying. I've got this. Now, please realize, David's not part of this army. And surely there's a reason why. David is not one who's considered a warrior and a fighter, that he would be out there on the front lines ready for battle. Nobody's looking at him and saying, oh yes, you clearly would be the one. He's somebody that was left behind back at home. And he's simply good enough to be the messenger for Jesse to bring provisions to his brothers who are out here at the front line ready for battle. You'll notice in verse 33 that we're told Saul essentially says, you can't fight this guy. That's not going to work. Verse 33, you're just a youth, and he's been a warrior since his youth. You don't have the experience, you don't have the ability, you're just a kid. He's been fighting since he was a kid. Essentially, here's your parenthetical, he's going to chew you up and spit you out. There's no way that this is going to work. You cannot do this. Listen to David's perspective. Listen to his response in verse 34. David answered Saul, your servant has been tending his father's sheep. Whenever a lion or a bear came and carried off a lamb from the flock, I went after it, struck it down, and rescued the lamb from its mouth. If it reared up against me, I would grab it by the fur, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed lions and bears. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. There's an answer. There's quite a response. Saul, don't worry. I've been able to do this in the past. But notice the basis of which he's describing. He says, the Lord has rescued me from lion and bear, and he will rescue me from this Philistine. That he has given me the ability in rescuing me from dealing with lions and all kinds of these obstacles. And because that's happened before, God will surely be with me again. I want you to see this perspective here. That what David has done is that he has learned faith from past experiences. We've been talking a lot about that idea, is that faith in the present is built upon the experiences of the past, how God has rescued in the past, how God has helped in the past. And that's what you see David just absolutely declaring. The reason he has faith in the present is because he sees what God has done for him in the past. This should be so important in terms of the molding of our faith, because this is what God is doing through our difficulties, is strengthening our faith and preparing our faith for the next obstacle to come. In fact, I would say it in this way. We have to make sure that we don't waste those past trials, past experiences, past difficulties, past hardships, and forgetting how God helped us through the darkest, most difficult of times. And he will do it again. That's what David is standing on. He got me through the past. He'll get me through this one now. And it would be awful for us to go through such trials and difficulties and not come out on the other side and say, see, look how God got me through that. So when the next obstacle comes, you can say, God got me through the past. He will get me through today and into the present. That's what David does. That's his simple perspective. You will notice David's perspective is not, well, I got pretty good at wrangling bears. Or I'm a really good warrior. I'm a pretty tough guy. I can do a lot of stuff. He just says, God helped me before, he'll help me again. He rescued me in the past, he'll rescue me again. And that's his simple faith. Nothing about himself. He doesn't say, I'm a great warrior, great fighter, you underestimate me. Instead, he says, you underestimate God. God will rescue me. He will deliver this Philistine into my hands. Must have been fairly convincing. Verse 37, Saul says to David, go and may the Lord be with you. Remember, everything rides on the line. Here's the challenge. Here is the essential contract. If we win, they become servants to us. But if they win, we become their servants. And now everything rides on David. David will be the one to represent Israel. He will be the champion fighter. And he is going to go out into the battle. In preparation for this battle that is about to happen, it is fairly humorous in verses 38 and 39. I think some humor in the story that Saul says, all right, we need to equip you for battle, and so come over here. And he starts putting Saul's helmet on his head and had him put all of Saul's armor on him. We already know that's not going to work. If Saul is a big, husky guy who is head and shoulders above everybody else, that's not going to work out very, very well. But David says, I haven't gone out to battle in armor before. I can't wear this. I don't know how to use it. You don't just throw armor on and there you go. And that's what David says in verse 39, where he says, I can't walk in these. I'm not used to them. They haven't been used on me. I haven't tried them out. And so he takes them off. Verse 40, instead, David is going to go out to battle with a staff in his hand, 5 smooth stones, and a sling. Now, you have to visualize that. You have to visualize, here is this warrior Goliath with helmet and with armor on the legs, big old spear, and David comes walking out in his normal attire, whatever clothes he was wearing that day to travel to the battle lines, carrying a stick and a sling and a pouch for 5 stones. There's a reason why Goliath is completely insulted by this. And you see this insult in verse 42. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he despised him because he was just a youth, healthy and handsome. And he said to David, am I a dog that you come against me with sticks? See the humor? You're walking out here with a stick, your staff, and a sling. What are we going to play fetch? Am I a dog that you're just going to throw a stick at me? Are you kidding me? This is the guy that you are sending out to me? Verse 43, he cursed David by his gods and said, come here and I will give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts. He goes, this is what you have? This is going to be easy. This is going to be nothing. Come on, let me kill you now. Verse 45. Here's David's perspective again. David says to the Philistine, you come against me with a sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of armies, the God of the ranks of Israel. You have defied him. Today, the Lord will hand you over to me. Today I'll strike you down, remove your head, and give the corpses of the Philistine camp to the birds of the sky and the wild creatures of the earth. Then all the world will know that Israel has a God, and this whole assembly will know that it is not by sword or by spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's. He will hand you over to us. Woo. Oh, you gotta love that. Here's the Philistines saying, I'm going to make your body a carcass in a minute, and the birds are going to eat it. And here is David saying, that's going to be you, buddy. You and all the Philistine armies, because you've defied God, God is going to hand you over. Notice the 2 perspectives. One, the battle belongs to the Lord. He says God has got this. Again, he doesn't put anything on himself. He doesn't say, I've got some fancy tricks up my sleeve. He says God's going to win. God is going to be victorious. God is going to be the one to win this battle. He is going to be the one who will be the rescuer. That's how verse 47 ends. He will hand you over to us. And you will notice the primary perspective of David. All he needs is God. That's all he needs. He doesn't need anything else. He doesn't need sword and spear. He doesn't need armor. He doesn't need anything except God. And that is his whole defense that he makes. All that I need is God. And so we notice that in verse 48, when the Philistines started forward to attack, you just imagine this big guy just lunging toward David. David ran quickly to the battle line to meet the Philistine. David put his hand into his bag, took out a stone, slung it, and hit the Philistine in his forehead, and the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell down to the ground. David defeated the Philistine with a sling and a stone. David overpowered the Philistine and killed him without having a sword. And David ran and stood over him. He grabbed the Philistine's sword, pulled it from its sheath, and used it to kill him. Then he cut off his head. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and Judah rallied, shouting their battle cry, and chased the Philistines to the entrance of the valley and to the gates of Ekron. Philistine bodies were strewn all along the Sharaim road to Gath and to Ekron. And when the Israelites returned from the pursuit of the Philistines, they plundered their camps. David took Goliath's head and brought it to Jerusalem, where he put Goliath's weapons in his own tent. Massive, massive victory. A phrase that we still even use in our world today, in our culture, the idea of the unlikely victory is a David versus Goliath kind of moment. The thing that I want to spend some time then talking about in regards to the message that we have here is I want you to notice something very important. The account is not about the fight. 2 verses are given about the fight. And you will notice that it's over 15 verses in this section. And it's not about the fight. Instead, it's about the speeches. What Goliath says, what David says. What Goliath says, and what David says. This is the big idea of what we see in the text. There are 2 main ideas. 2 main messages that I think are intended here. Number 1, we have seen throughout our study of 1 Samuel these images of the rise of the anointed. It's the theme of 1 Samuel as we've been practicing and teaching and talking and studying about this text. And we see then David as a model of ultimately how God is going to save the world and how God is going to rescue Israel. Notice the picture that is put before us is that Israel has an enemy that it cannot defeat. It is an impossible enemy, and Saul, though king, and though Israel with warriors, they are terrified, they cannot win, they cannot go up against Goliath. And the way God is going to rescue is he's going to send his anointed who will bring about the victory and overpower the enemy on behalf of Israel. That is the picture that is being drawn out here. God is going to rescue Israel through his anointed, which is a very powerful image of how God is going to save the world, as he is going to use his anointed to overcome our enemy, to deal with all that stands against us, those that we could not be victorious over, and our greatest enemies, Satan, sin, and death. That's the picture that lies before us, is there is no hope as we stand before those enemies. There is no way for us to be victorious. We need the anointed to come and fight the battle, to give us the victory, to overcome Satan, to overcome sin, and to overcome death. Friends, this is what the writer of Hebrews is driving at when he says in Hebrews 2, verse 14, since the children have flesh and blood, he, speaking of Christ, too shared in their humanity. Why? So that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death. That is the devil. And now watch. and set free those who all of their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. You're getting a picture of what God is going to ultimately do. In our scene in 1 Samuel 17, every time Goliath walks out, the Israelites run away in fear. There's no hope. They can't win. They look to themselves. They cannot accomplish victory. They need someone to be a champion who will fight on their behalf and give them victory. Jesus is pictured as our champion warrior who goes into the battle, defeats Satan, sets us free from the fear of death, sets us free from sin and death, all because of our Lord and Savior Jesus. The picture that we see is that the battle belongs to the Lord, and the whole world is to know that it is the Lord who saves. This is the first picture that is being shown through David, is that God will send his anointed to rescue. The second picture is just as important, and it's a part of this account that is easy to miss. In being caught up in the account of David and Goliath and the great victory that happens, please notice the result of David's victory. In verse 52, remember what these men of Israel were doing before? Every time this Philistine trotted out, they all ran away terrified. Saul couldn't get anybody to go out there and fight this guy. I'll give you riches. I'll make you free from taxes. I'll give you my daughter in marriage. Just go fight this guy. Nobody will do it. But after David defeats Goliath, verse 52 shows that the people of Israel rally, shout the battle cry, and chase the Philistines all the way out of that valley. Notice, all the way to the gates of Ekron. Ekron is in Philistia. So they chase them from halfway into Israel's territory, all the way back to the coastland, all the way back to the Philistine territory. And verse 52 says, their bodies are strewn all over the place from Gath to Ekron. And then once that was done, in verse 53, they come back and plunder their camps and take everything that they have. All of a sudden, now victory is given to the Israelite battlers, and now they are able to be victorious. And I think it's such an important picture that now that this impossible opponent has been defeated, now the rest of Israel can also enjoy victory. Now they're pictured as being a part of the battle and accomplishing the victory and able to defeat the opponents and being able to have victory over the rest of their enemies. It is such an important picture because this is what the New Testament is constantly pointing to, that because of the victory that has been accomplished through Christ, now we do not fear, but we are able to overcome the spiritual enemies that stand against us. This is why the writer of Ephesians, the Apostle Paul, can say, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Because of what Christ has accomplished, you now can be strong and have victory against the spiritual enemies. The very next line is to put on the armor of God so that you can stand against the schemes of the devil. There is a picture that because we have our champion victor in Christ, we also then enjoy the victory. I thought about doing it, 30 more minutes, but Ephesians 4, friends. Ephesians 4 is a picture of Christ descending and ascending, taking captives and giving the spoils to his who belong to him. And remember what the spoils were? To some he gave apostles and prophets and evangelists and shepherds and teachers. That's the spoils. Here is Jesus winning the victory and we're enjoying the benefits. That's the imagery that is coming out to us here, is this amazing picture because of what Christ has accomplished. Now we are able to be victorious with him. And so in ending then, this is what we're talking about in terms of perspective. Our perspective matters. Think about Saul's perspective. Saul's perspective in all of this was to not have any thought or any regard for God being with him. What does Saul do? I can't beat this guy. And he's the most likely option. He's their best chance. The rest of the Israelite army, why are they not taking the opportunity to be tax-free and have great wealth and marry into the king family? Because they're not seen with a perspective that God is with them. Instead, they're looking at the physical, aren't they? They're just simply looking at the physical that lies in front of them, and they say, we cannot win. There is no hope. There's no way. There's no possibility. We have no chance. But David has a perspective that he did not have hope in himself. It wasn't hope in his own abilities. It wasn't that he was a good fighter. It wasn't that he was somebody important or somebody special. His hope was not even in looking at the obstacle of Goliath and saying, I think I can get him. His hope was that God was with him. That is the perspective that has to take place for us. Is that we either have faith that God is with us, or we have faith in ourselves. We have a faith in ourselves that says, well, I'm going to look at these physical obstacles, and here's what I can do, and here's the obstacle, and I don't know if I can do it or not, but I'm going to try. That's not faith in God. That's faith in ourselves. David does not look at himself in the slightest. He has faith that God is going to be with him. When we face difficulties, obstacles, challenges, trials, our hope is not in ourselves, but our hope is that we're able to look to God for help. This is where sometimes this text gets turned around and say, well, you now go be a David, you go fight your battles and go kill all your Goliaths. That's not the message of the story. Now, the message of the story is with God on your side, with your faith in God, yes, you will be victorious, but it's not because of you and your power and your might and your strength and your smarts and your experience. It's because you put your trust in God. That's what David does here. David says, it's not about me, but I know God is with me. And if God is with me, we will be rescued. We will overcome. And that is the hope that is given to us. It is not that we are empowered to defeat our enemies, but that any obstacle that comes against us, we look to God to overcome that obstacle on our behalf. That is the picture that's being given to us here. And the way we have that perspective, and the way that we have that hope is similar to the scene here. In the scene here, once David wins against Goliath, they all know God's with us. And they just chase the Philistines right out of there. With the cross, we look back at it and go, God is with us. And we can overcome because we see the cross of Christ. In the cross, Satan, sin, and death, our greatest enemies, our greatest obstacles, were defeated. And now will we then lack faith in God to think that He will not carry us through whatever obstacle, whatever difficulty, whatever pain, and whatever suffering that lies ahead. The cross is what gives us hope. When we have doubts, when we have fears, when we have concerns, when faith begins to be shaken, we look back at the cross and see what was accomplished through Christ, just as Israel was able to look back at this moment and realize God is with us because of the great victory that was accomplished by God through David. That is our hope, that we put our faith and trust in God. Let's go to God in prayer. Heavenly Father, biggest problem was sin. And our biggest enemy was Satan. And without you, there is no hope. There is no rescue. There is no victory. There is no eternity with our Father. Thank you for being our champion fighter. That, Lord, you would send your Son to take a frail human form like us, give your life over so that we could have victory over the obstacle we could not overcome. I pray, Lord, that we would never forget what you've accomplished for us on the cross. I pray, Lord, that that would always be firmly emblazoned in our mind, that the cross is always the place of our hope, that you have won the battle. You have accomplished our victory. Lord, may that strengthen our faith to hold on to you even more tightly in difficult times. Lord, give us faith to see our obstacles and then turn to you, because you win the victory. You are the one who gives us success. You are the one who carries us through. God, give us a stronger faith to see it. Lord, give us a faith like David to not look at the physical obstacle that lies ahead of us. Give us faith to always see you, to see how you are for us. You have brought us this far. You will bring us all the way. Thank you for your Son. Thank you for the victory that we have through your Son. And it's through your Son we pray this tonight. Amen. Sing now the invitation song. We invite you to come to Jesus, the champion.